Music is a common topic for documentaries. Whether it's a concert film or following an artist's journey, music docs can give us an up-close and personal perspective on these otherwise mythical beings. When these music docs focus on rock music, we call them rockumentaries. And there's been loads of brilliant and iconic rockumentaries throughout time, from Gimme Shelter to This Is Spinal Tap. But on today's video, I'm going to be reviewing what I believe to be the best rockumentary of all time. Although, I'm not ready quite yet. Give me a second. That's better. Wait. There we are. A Pennebaker's Don't Look Back is a fly-on-the-wall documentary that follows Bob Dylan on his 1965 tour of England. Don't Look Back is an example of direct cinema, meaning the filmmakers take a step back and simply observe the events that are being filmed. The director and crew intentionally have no impact whatsoever on what's happening in order to keep it as close to real life as possible. In this sense, you can say that the camera is passive. Without this film wouldn't be anywhere near as successful. I mentioned in the intro how music docs grant us access to these mythical beings, and well, there's no one more mythical than Bob Dylan. The guy's an enigma, and you're never really sure what his true self is. So being granted this intimate and uncommon perspective is, well, revolutionary. And sure, yes, there's an argument that just the presence of the camera alone is enough to make someone act up, but I think for the most part, what we get is an unprovoked look at Bob Dylan. I mean, we see him be a bit of a twat at times, so if he was playing up to the camera, maybe he'd dial the twatness back.
I mean, what is your whole attitude to life? And when you meet somebody, what is your attitude towards them?
I don't like them.
You don't?
No. Just give me a reason why I should want to know you.
I might be worth knowing.
Why?
Huh?
Why? Tell me why. What good is it going to be for me to know you? Tell me. Name me one thing I'm going to gain.
What can I say about
Well,
understanding?
you can ask your first question.
Hmm?
You can ask your first question.
Oh.
Go ahead. If you got a question to ask, come on.
Oh.
You haven't got any questions?
Well, I didn't.
I think somebody's calling for you.
You want me to go? Okay, I'll go.
You don't have to go.
But the film itself is just littered with brilliant snippets of a busy tour for the artist. And of course, the performances in this film are just beautiful. I'm already a big Bob Dylan fan, but these renditions are hypnotic. For the most part, these songs are just filmed as a close-up of Dylan's face, and you get the impression that he means every single word. It is really absorbing and contrasts really well to his more playful moments like his interactions with the press, something I'm sure will make anyone smile. He has reporters in the palm of his hand and isn't afraid to say anything. Dylan famously had a bit of a tempestuous relationship with the press, and if that interests you, then I would definitely recommend watching this because there's some really great scenes of that. And while the film follows a tour indicating no real plot, for example, there is some sort of string of narrative found throughout the film. And this revolves around the singer Donovan, who is hinted at early on in the film. He's presented as a bit of a rival to Dylan and is being hyped up by the British press. Dylan jokingly says he hates him early on, and it plants the seed for some sort of tension between the two.
He's been around and he plays very good guitar. He's a very good guitar player. He's better than you.
Yeah.
All right?
Right away, I hate him.
And this leads to one of the best scenes in the film where they finally meet. It's not as hostile as you might want it to be, but there's this underlying mental chess game going on, and it's really thrilling to watch. It's fantastic stuff.
Search out to me with your weary eyes. I'll sing a song for you. That's what I'm here to do. And it's all over now, baby blue. The highway is for gamblers. Better use your sense. Take what you have gathered.
I could talk all day about the various scenes in this film and how much I love them, but I really want to talk about the rest of the Blu-ray. And there's a lot of special features to get through, so bottom line, this is a great film. One of the best and most influential documentaries of all time. If you're at all interested in the genre, do yourself a favour and get it watched. If you're not a fan of Bob Dylan, then I'd still sort of recommend it. It's got a really interesting commentary about celebrity, and while Dylan is of course the star of the show, it doesn't feel exclusive or like an in-joke that you wouldn't get. And besides, it might make you a Bob Dylan fan, which, that would be great.
Scottish
Bloke.
That's I was going to say that, but I didn't know if you'd understand.
Oh, then bloke.
Yeah.
Bloke.
Look.
Bloke.
Anyway, he was singing a bit of folk music, and he's been around.
So, let's unpack the special features. And like I said already, there's a lot to get through, which is great if you're a fan. First up is a commentary with director Pennebaker and tour manager Bob Newirth, where ironically enough, they do look back. I'll say now that this Criterion is as much dedicated to Pennebaker as it is to Dylan. Even though he's not in the film, this film is so surely his. He is the reason it works as well as it does. And like most commentaries, this is great for finding out insights and anecdotes into the production of the film, and in this case, what it was like to be around Bob Dylan at what many would call the height of his career. I think this works especially well because we see a director attach himself to the thing he was originally removed from. It almost feels like the version of the film where Pennebaker is involved. So in that sense, it acts like a great companion piece to the original version, more so than a standard commentary. And then my favourite inclusion is another Pennebaker documentary, 65 Revisited. This is made up of unused footage that was filmed during the tour, and it's basically another Don't Look Back, which adds so much value for money to this whole Blu-ray. You're getting two films for one, basically. Now, it isn't as great as Don't Look Back, mainly down to the editing choices I find, but it's still great. Like, it's more Dylan being Dylan, and any footage of that for me is golden. I'm trying to move quickly here because there's a lot to get through. Up next is a brief audio clip from a 2000 interview with Bob Dylan himself. And it's really interesting to hear him talk about how seamless the filming was. He says he became oblivious to it eventually, which I think is really important when you consider the debate around the film as to whether Dylan is being himself. He also talks about the difference between the UK fans and US fans, saying the UK were more passionate early on, which I think was really interesting. And he also briefly talks about Pennebaker, saying he was obnoxious but no doubt a talented filmmaker. It's cut to unseen clips too, which makes it just as good a visual piece as it is audio. And then, guess what? Yep, another documentary. There's so many documentaries on one disc! This one was made for Criterion and is a 30-minute exploration of Pennebaker and how his filmmaking style has evolved. It centralises on his love of music, which is the focal point of many of his documentaries. We hear from Pennebaker himself, and it's great to see him speak about his process, especially in regards to his editing style. I think documentarians don't really get enough credit for how integral one person's vision can be. Pennebaker is as much an auteur as Bergman or Truffaut, so to hear him talking about his work really cements this fact for me. My favourite thing he says is when he talks about narration being the enemy of cinema. Events have to happen as if they were alive. So as he says, instead of someone telling you why they're killing the chicken, you have to see the chicken being killed. And he relates this to Don't Look Back, as it was his goal to see a poet emerge from Bob Dylan. At the time, Dylan was constantly acclaimed as being a poet, and instead of Pennebaker telling us this, he just lets events happen so we can see this for ourselves. I think it's a unique viewpoint that is so essential to his style. His films are explored really well and their techniques are analysed so you get a good understanding of how Pennebaker's choices affect the final film. He also talks a bit about the Don't Look Back follow-up of Dylan's 1966 tour. The project was directed by Dylan and shot by Pennebaker. Dylan also took up the editing, but this resulted in it being ill-fated, not having ever been physically released. My only wish is that it was included on the disc too, but I understand why it wasn't. Either way, it's cool to hear Pennebaker talk about it regardless. Also included are 3 short films directed by Pennebaker, which are discussed by Pennebaker in the documentary. These are Daybreak Express, Baby, and Lambert & Co. Having them be available after hearing them discussed is great, as it makes you appreciate them even more. You recognise Pennebaker's trademark style, and the pieces work as great companions to Don't Look Back, which you can identify how his skill has only improved. Lambert & Co. is especially incredible when you hear the story behind it. I don't want to spoil it, but basically Pennebaker captures something that no longer exists. And then we get a really great conversation between Bobby Newirth and Pennebaker. This was recorded later than the commentary was, so the two feel even more reminiscent. They again have great chemistry, and the perspectives that they both offer feel so genuine and worth listening to. It's roughly 34 minutes in length, and intercut with footage from the tour. They talk about Dylan at that time and how the film portrays him. No surprise, it's really engaging stuff, and I would say it's more accessible than the commentary, due to seeing them actually speak and its shorter length. They also talk about other collaborations between them, which gives you an insight into other areas of their career. And then, I almost can't believe it, but I can, we get another selection of outtakes titled Snapshots from the Tour, which is basically another 26-minute long documentary. Another follow-up to Don't Look Back, and then 65 Revisited. This one was made for the Criterion release and shows that they've really tried to squeeze every single bit of footage out of this tour, which I'm so grateful for. This is like the most comprehensive guide to a single tour that I've ever seen. The scenes included here, while understandably outtakes, are still enjoyable and show Dylan in some hilarious situations. We then get an interview with musician and poet Patti Smith. And this inclusion feels random, but it's still interesting and complements the Blu-ray as a celebration of Bob Dylan. She talks about his influence and her love of the film. As someone as famous as her, it's great to see her so unashamedly a fan of something. She shares that same love and excitement we feel for Bob Dylan and his music, so it becomes a really, really enduring interview.
For me, it was like visceral, physical. I was a teenage girl. I mean, he voiced a lot of things, politically, poetically, but he had a lot of magnetism. I mean, for me, as a sexual energy, not in a, more in a sort of a fantasy term, He was like my imaginary boyfriend for a while.
Next up, we have a 17-minute conversation between Pennebaker and Grail Marcus, who is a music critic. They talk about the film and key scenes, including the famous Donovan one, where they weigh up on how Dylan destroys Donovan. They have an admiration and respect for each other too, resulting in a thoughtful and interesting conversation. It's great hearing Marcus's more analytical thoughts in contrast to Pennebaker's creative ones too. We also get a third version of the Subterranean Homesick Blues cue card scene, the same one that I just did a minute ago. The second version of this was included in 65 Revisited. This one is filmed in the Savoy Hotel Gardens and features a bit more action, like Allen Ginsberg taking off his jumper, for example. I think the version that's used in the final film is ultimately the best one, but it's still cool to see these alternate takes of such an iconic scene. Then we get an additional 5 recordings of songs that Dylan performed during the tour. We have It Ain't Me Babe, It's All Over Now Baby Blue, A Love Minus Zero, Hattie Carroll and To Ramona. These are like the complete versions of the songs that are not included in the final film. There's no accompanying visuals, but the songs themselves are just beautiful. Not much else to say really, but if you like his music then you'll no doubt love these. They are just Bob Dylan songs basically, and I love that. And finally, we have the trailer. Whew! So yeah, that's a lot. Altogether, there's about 5 hours and 40 minutes of content, as well as the audio commentary. All on one disc, which is so great in terms of value for money. Wow! You love to see it, don't you? So yeah, on top of all that, we get this gorgeously designed casing. The cover photo is brilliant. It's like the defining image of the film, Bob Dylan sat in the back of a car with dark shades and a cigarette. The top and bottom have this really cool black and grey striped design, which I just think adds so much to the overall aesthetic and really is evocative of that black and white photography of the film. And then I'll show you the back there. So if I pull out the slipcase there, we're greeted with 2 images of Bob Dylan. One where he looks fed up and exhausted, probably because of the press. And the second one where he just sort of looks cool and it's like a painting really. He like disappears into the black background, still maintaining the cigarettes and sunglasses combination. And then when we open it up, we have an example of Criterion going that extra step to ensure this is just the best possible product. The inside, if we take the booklet out, is made up of the cue cards from the Subterranean Homesick Blues video. It's such a great design that is unnecessary but adds so much flavour to the product. It's really the cherry on top. So as you can see, there's the disc there. I'll take that out so you can see the rest of the cue cards. Looking at the booklet included, it's a pretty simple cover, and again we have a picture of Dylan on the back there. When we flick through it, you can see that there's scans throughout of stuff like posters, fan letters, tour programs, schematics, that sort of stuff, newspaper headings, and it's really cool because it's all from around the time of filming, and it really conveys the era. And it shows us the process of the art direction too, how Dylan was received at the time, and how he was presented by his managers. So accompanying this is an essay by critic and poet Robert Polito. He analyses not only the film, but the Dylan we see too. He interviewed Pennebaker too and mentions how he struggled finding a distributor for the film. That was until he met a porn director who wanted to get out of the industry, but liked Don't Look Back because it had similar qualities to porn at the time. And to be honest, I think he makes a great point considering the grainy, up-close footage, Really, that captures that aesthetic really well. But overall, the essay is a really in-depth look at the film and a satisfying inclusion, offering great perspectives and breakdowns on important filmmaking choices. So, if you couldn't tell, I adore this Criterion. This really feels like the definitive version of this film, and I think it's so easily among Criterion's best ever releases. Not only is this a fantastic collection of content for Bob Dylan fans, but also for Pennebaker fans. It documents the career of one of the most influential documentarians of all time, and in that sense it feels like essential viewing for anybody interested in the history of documentary. I recommend it so much for both music and film fans. And sure, Bob Dylan fans will likely get more of a kick out of it, so if you hate Bob Dylan, then yeah, maybe don't buy it actually, maybe don't. But it's usually about £20 in the UK, and I think it's worth every single penny. So yeah, if you want to watch the greatest rockumentary of all time, then this is the way to do it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I've really enjoyed talking about another film that I love. I get such a kick from doing these. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Hey!